What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Mind Something. If you're new here, my name is Jake, and in today's video we've got a lot of stuff to talk about, so it's probably going to be a long one. Strap in, and I'll put some chapters in here so that you guys can skip over the content you're not interested in. First, let's talk about the 3060 Ti that came out with GDDR6X. We talked about this about a month or two ago, and now they're out, and I'm really curious if hash rates are still the same. And then we've got a new pool for Ergo. We've got a woman trying to smuggle CPUs. And has Nvidia learned its lesson yet? Also, when are we going to get some more support from Intel? And then I got a couple of recommendations for YouTubers for you guys to check out. And then lastly, and the most important thing that I want to talk to you guys about is a very troubling recommendation or proposal around Kaspa. So let's get into it. First, we got a new pool from ViperNet, which is for Ergo, and we have 4 different stratums for you. So United States, Europe, South America, and Asia. And the reason I think this is very interesting at this particular junction is because, do you guys remember when we took a look at the Osprey or Osprey, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but the FPGA miner for Kaspa that just recently launched? In the description of that, they talk about it being able to mine Ergo. And I've also heard a lot of rumblings about ASICs or FPGAs being on Ergo. And I'm very curious if hash rate is going to increase drastically once these E300s are out in the wild on Ergo. Now, I haven't heard anybody specifically stating what the hash rates are or if it's even possible, but you know, if you look directly at their website, it does say something about Ergo. So maybe a good idea to jump onto Ergo. Now, when it comes to Ergo and the difficulties that they've been facing recently, I think we still have a little bit of downside to go. I could see Ergo dropping down to maybe around $1. I think there is a very strong psychological level of support for Ergo at $1, but potentially it could go lower. I think that all depends on the rest of the crypto market and where we go from here. Have we bottomed? Have we not? You know, traditionally at this point, we would be at the bottom of the bear market, and from this point, we'd be stepping into spring. But we're facing a much different macroeconomic situation before than we have in the past. So it's tough to say for sure, but you know, starting a pool for Ergo, kudos to ViperNet for doing this. You know, any additional pools that we have out there to distribute the hash rate, I am all for. And if you guys haven't seen the user interface for ViperNet, it's actually really good. I like the dark theme. There's a lot of different things about ViperNet that I find enticing. If you guys haven't tried it yet, you know, from my experience, what I have found is if you're on the top pool, yes, that pool is probably going to hit the most blocks. However, you are sharing those blocks with a lot more people. So typically, mining to a pool that's number 2 or number 3 is kind of a sweet spot. And I know that ViperNet has really hit that sweet spot for Radiant for me specifically. I get a lot of shares and I do quite well on Radiant. And I'm excited to see them launch an Ergo pool. Anyways, moving on, let's talk about this GDDR6X card or 3060 Ti from Asus TUF. We talked about this a couple of months ago. I don't know if there's going to be a substantial difference on memory intensive algorithms, but the assumption is that yes, you should see perhaps a slight increase in hash rates, perhaps at the cost of higher temps on your GPU or your memory. And I'm really curious for anybody out there who's watching this right now, if you have a 3060 Ti with GDDR6X, I would love to see your comments down below. Is there any difference in hash rates on any algorithm that you're mining. So anyways, moving on, let's talk about this lady trying to smuggle CPUs and iPhones past customs. So here you can see a picture of her fake silicone belly pretending to be pregnant. Anyways, in a story initially reported by My Drivers, a Chinese woman attempting to enter, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, via Gobi was stopped by a customs agent who noted the woman's unnatural posture. Initially, she appeared to be in a late-term pregnancy. However, as she spoke to the customs agent, she stated that she was around 5 to 6 months pregnant. This sent alarm bells ringing as she was searched further. There it was revealed that the woman was in fact not pregnant at all. She was wearing a fake belly made out of silicone in order to evade the guards and avoid customs. Though she was using a silicone fake belly, she did not manage to evade the security machines, which easily identified something suspicious on her body. The woman is thought to have been traveling from Moscow, which is presumably where the CPUs and iPhones have been acquired. Staff then found 202 Intel CPUs in addition to 9 iPhones scotch taped to the woman. We estimate that the total value of the Intel Adler Lake CPUs found on the woman, in addition to the iPhones she attempted to smuggle, at around $50,000 in total value. It's unclear if the woman acquired the CPUs and iPhones legally, however, but it appears like she has not gotten away with pulling off this particular heist. According to the report, the main thing that gave her away was her seemingly sprightly posture, even though she appeared to be heavily pregnant. It's believed that she was smuggling CPUs and iPhones in order to evade taxes. However, the customer of the goods that she was smuggling is probably not too happy about the outcome. It should also be noted that a similar attempt was made earlier this year by another man who was also eventually caught. We'd love to see smugglers attempt to cross a border with some RTX 4090s strapped to their bodies, but they might have a tougher luck trying not to get spotted. So, yeah, that's a pretty wild story, man. You know, when it comes to embargoes, taxes, tariffs, all of these different things, there's just so many issues with our governments across the world that people are being forced to do stuff like this. And it's sad for a lot of different reasons. But, you know, if you try to get away with stuff like this, obviously you're going to get caught, right? But anyways, moving on. So Nvidia GeForce RTX 3060 8GB, why you should avoid it. And this is what I was referring to when I asked, has Nvidia not learned its lesson? So do you remember that time when Nvidia unlaunched a product stating that despite a fantastic graphics card, it wasn't named right? Having 2 GPUs with the same RTX 4080 design is confusing. That's right, we're talking about the unlaunching of the 12GB RTX 4080 about 2 months ago. For those of you not up to speed, when Nvidia announced their latest GeForce 40 series, they did so with 3 products: the flagship RTX 4090, the RTX 4080 16GB, and the 4080 12GB. The problem was that the 2 RTX variants were very different, and those differences were not limited to memory capacity as the naming scheme was hinted. That's because in order to cut down the memory capacity without lower density chips, you also need to reduce the memory bus width. Using different silicone that would result in substantially different performance was not a good move, but this sort of dodgy behavior wasn't new. Nvidia has done it before, for example with the DDR4 version of the GeForce GT 1030. The big mistake was announcing the RTX 4080 12GB and that particular anti-consumer move to the world in the biggest event Nvidia has held in years. Traditionally, how they would like to handle dodgy product releases is to sneak them out at a later date via a silent launch, meaning far fewer people notice and even fewer seem to care. Well, this is exactly what they have done with the 8 gig variant of the GeForce RTX 3060. Ironically, they launched this product on October 27th, just 12 days after unlaunching the 12 gig 4080 for having a confusing name. Although it's true that both the 8 gig and the 12 gig variants of the RTX 3060 are based on the GA106 silicone, it is technically the same GPU. The changes still go well beyond an adjustment to memory capacity. The memory subsystem of the 8 gigabyte model has been drastically reduced. The L2 cache is 50% larger for the 12 gig model, as is the bus width. All in all, bandwidth is 61% greater in the original RTX 3060 model, producing 360 gigabytes, whereas the new 8 gig variant has been slashed to just 224, the same bandwidth as the RTX 3050. Ultimately, this means that the 8 gig RTX 3060 is going to be slower than the 12 gig model, and spoiler alert, it's 15% slower on average, but in some instances we're seeing margins of over 30%. So it's a big enough deal for us to bring it to your attention. One additional note, Nvidia hasn't made any official adjustments to MSRPs, so the RTX 3060 still comes on at $330. Looking over at Newegg, we can see that the 12 gig RTX 3060 starts at $350, with a number of models available for between $350 and $380. Meanwhile, the most affordable 8 gig variant comes from Inno3D and starts at $385, though there are some Asus models on back order at $360 and $370. Point is, in terms of pricing, there's no distinguishing between the original 12 gig model and the new gimped 8 gigabyte versions. In Australia, we brought a Galax model that we purchased for a 10% discount from the original 12 gigabyte version. You might think, well, that's okay, but it's not. The RTX 3060 was released almost 2 years ago. Everyone is familiar with how it performs, and those that aren't can quickly consult the bevy of online benchmarks. Meanwhile, the new 8 gigabyte model is nowhere to be found, as there isn't a review program. It's up to reviewers to purchase the card and inform consumers. In fact, you might not even know there was an 8 gigabyte version, or simply assume that the RTX 3060 only came with 8 gigabytes of VRAM, just as the 3060 Ti does. The trap here is that unsuspecting consumers could be baited into paying RTX 3060 12 gigabyte memory, or very near so, for a product that's significantly slower. We asked Nvidia for an official response about why the 8 gig variant was released, and they simply said it was to offer customer more options. They also stated that the 12 gigabyte version was going to remain available in parallel, and just to be clear, this is Nvidia sanctioned product and not their partners going rogue. Rather, it's possible partners are obligated to produce it. Nvidia appears to be looking to clear out their inventory of low-end Ampere GPUs and are no doubt keen to maximizing profits as they do so. This also allows them to sell defective GA106 silicon for far more than they would get selling it as an RTX 3050. Our issue is, of course, that we now have two products called GeForce RTX 3060, and they don't deliver the same level of performance, and in many instances it's not even close. And we're not talking about memory bound testing, as in exceeding the 8 gigabyte VRAM buffer. We're talking about performance when remaining well within the 8 gigabyte buffer. So let's take a look at that. We'll go over a few games and then show you a 12 game average for collecting these results. We've used fresh data from both the 12 gigabyte and the 8 gigabyte 3060 cards using the latest display drivers. Other GPUs are included for comparison purposes. So we'll just take a look at this chart real quick. So where is the 3060? There's a 3060 Ti. There it is. So yeah, pretty poor performance margin in comparison. Anyways, it's despicable. You know, I don't think at this point any of us expect any less from Nvidia. But it just goes to show that they have not learned their lesson. So look forward to more of this BS from Nvidia. Anyways, moving on to their drivers. I did finally download Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 that came with my Intel Acer A770. And I wasn't able to play it until installing the newest drivers, which is 527.37. You guys are probably aware there was a 526 that was out, but after doing a little bit of reading, apparently that was having issues with Windows 11. In some cases, it was reporting that the GPU was using 100% capacity, which in fact was not correct. Anyways, speaking of drivers, let's talk about Intel for a moment. So it looks like the most recent release of drivers was on 11/18 of 2022. And I just wanted to cover some of the things that this corrected and some of the ongoing issues that they still have. So we got fixes for Doom Eternal, Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six, Death Stranding Director's Cut, Forza Horizon 5. Known issues: Sonic Frontiers may experience flickering corruption on Intel Arc A380 graphics products when frame rate limit setting is set to 60. A workaround is to set frame rate limit to 30. Call of Duty may experience missing or corrupt shadows during the submarine mission. Anyways, there's lots of issues here. And then as far as ongoing issues are concerned, the biggest thing for us as miners, right, is the lack of control over memory. I believe it's locked at like 2,000. And I'm really curious, like, how long does it take to be able to get something done here? I mean, I would think that Intel would want to capitalize on the mining situation, and they dropped the ball, right? They released these cards way too late prior to the merge, and now it just seems like that's not going to be a priority, which is very unfortunate. And for that particular reason, I haven't even taken my Acer A770 out of the box, other than the unboxing video to show it to you guys, to test it on my my system. I really want to. In fact, I'd like to take this 3080 Ti out that's in there right now and throw it into a rig so that when I'm, you know, creating content, I don't have to stop mining on it. I'd love to be able to use this Acer, but you know, if you can't mine, it's not a huge priority for me right now. And you know, when it comes to overclocking, I think a lot of you guys have seen many of my videos, and I do what I can, but time is limited. And I just wanted to point you guys to Kiwi Crypto for a moment. There's a few people that have left the space, and I really miss some of them. And if you can hear me out there, Crypto Donkey Miner, I miss you, bro. Please make a video, even if it's stand-up comedy. I'll watch it 80 times, I promise you. Anyway, so getting back to Kiwi Crypto. So this guy is a wizard, and he's got a lot of different GPUs, a variety of AMD and Nvidia cards. And man, if you guys are looking for phenomenal overclocks on just about every algorithm, it's not just Kaspa and Radiant that he's testing. He's also testing a lot of other things. For example, Conceal. Let's see, what else we got? Kryptonite. Let's just Cortex. Yeah, anyways, you guys get the picture. He tests a lot of different stuff. He's been around for quite a while. And if you guys are looking for overclocks, I've got lots of spreadsheets that I've shared on trying to get as efficient as you can on a lot of different algorithms like Kaspa, like Radiant. I need to put one out for Flux. Of course, we've covered all of the ETH stuff way in the past. But you know, I don't really mind anything like Neoxa or Ravencoin. Not to say anything bad about those particular projects. I just don't like the abuse on my GPUs. And you know, one thing that we haven't talked about is how amazing is it that we don't have to mine some of the most inefficient algorithms out there to try and gain any percentage of profit whatsoever. We've been able to get some profits out of Kaspa and Radiant at ridiculously low power levels. I mean, I'm using, I think, less than half. No, probably right at half of the amount of power that I was using mining ETH, mining Kaspa or Radiant, which is freaking awesome. And, you know, perhaps without the solar system that I have, I would have shut off a long time ago. But, you know, at some point, I think both Kaspa and Radiant will have ASICs. And we're going to have to find another GPU mineable coin out there. And I'm very interested to see the future of it, because if somebody doesn't come out with another algorithm that is ASIC resistant and isn't as efficient as K-Heavy Hash or the SHA, what is it, 256 or 512, can't remember. But yeah, it'll be very unfortunate if we have to go back up to the power usage that we were used to in the past with ETH. And speaking of Radiant, Red Panda Mining made a video today, about 9 hours ago, about Radiant. And you know, I would expect a lot of hash rate to move, considering it's been the most profitable coin to mine for, I don't know, maybe several months at this point. And I want to take a look at profitability and hash rate after Red Panda made his video. So I think he was, you know, pretty concerned about making a video. And guys, you got to understand things from his perspective for just a moment. I know that he's taken a little bit of flack for not talking about Radiant prior to this particular video, but I want to stand in his corner and just explain to you guys that when you're on that level, you really have to consider everyone and not just a select few people. And I personally think that that's what he was doing. And when you look at the amount of hash rate that can move when someone like Red Panda Mining or Son of a Tech or Rabid Mining, any of these guys out here that have tens of thousands of followers, you know, you have to consider what is best for everyone as a whole, as opposed to, you know, what is best for just a select few people. And by not mentioning Radiant, you know, I don't know how long he's known about it, but, you know, regardless, he's probably protected the entire project as a whole from getting overrun with hash rate. And then you have somebody like me opposing that, in the sense that I'm a very small channel. We got 2,000 subscribers. I can talk about Radiant all day long, and it's not going to significantly affect Radiant's hash rate, but it is starting to at this point. But anyways, taking a look at the time frame that he had mentioned it, his video came out roughly about 8 in the morning, and hash rate was at about 64 terahash. And at the time of recording of this video, which is about 7 o'clock in the evening for me, we're sitting at 66 terahash. So not much of a change there. And let's take a look at profitability on it real quick. So if you guys have been watching the videos, you know I was coming in somewhere around $9 a day in revenue and about $4 a day after power. And look, we're still there, which is awesome. So yeah, probably switch the rigs back over. I've been mining Kaspa for the last couple of days. I'm hosting some equipment for a good friend of mine, and he's interested in accumulating Kaspa. So in the process of setting up his rigs, I just kind of moved everything over into Kaspa, but probably be switching back over to Radiant until difficulty just gets to a point where it's outweighing the profitability of Kaspa. Anyway, so the last thing that I want to talk to you guys about is a really, really big deal. And I want you guys to take this to heart, and I want you to voice your opinion. So I noticed this post on Reddit today. The community is discussing to tax miners for 2%, and they leave a link to this. I'm not going to read all of the comments in Reddit, but I do want to cover some of the comments in Discord. So let me just enlarge this and read this off to you guys. So this person, Tim, says, I'd like to post the following. It is known that the Kaspa project is not provided with any external funding, but relies on community funding instead. However, all of our previous rounds of development fund raising have always been closed for the most part by the efforts of just a few people. The community is grateful to its whales for this absolutely invaluable early support, but the project continues to evolve. Funds are needed to implement Dagnite, smart contracts, integrate with a hardware wallet, pass the Howey test, ensure payment for hosting infrastructure elements, website, web wallet, and KDX and their updates, and other online subsystems of the project. Yet to come, bounty program, rewarding the initiatives of the community members, etc. Therefore, a mechanism is needed to ensure a more predictable and expectable flow of finance. Now, I'm going to push back a little bit on this needed part here. To this end, it is proposed to do the following. Post on the project website and all suitable controlled resources, Wiki, Discord, Telegram, Reddit, etc., the following appeal to the owners and developers of miners, Stratum proxies, and Kaspa pools. In order to ensure the reliable development of the project, the community asks all existing and, from now on, a new pool developers and or owners to add 2% deductions to the Kaspa public fund, in addition to those fees that already exist in their software in favor of their owners and developers. Developers of the Stratum Kaspa proxies are asked to add the same 2% fee. Developers of miners capable of working in the mode of direct connection to the node, able to mine solo in the node's native mode, to add the same 2% fee when miner is used in the native mining mode. Make these commissions obligatory or non-disposable without rebuilding the code, so as not to pose a moral problem for people to choose between helping the project and receiving small additional personal benefit. Consider this appeal as an official request from the Kaspa community to the owners and developers of pools, miners, and proxy software, and ask them to implement the relevant functionality as soon as possible, given the rapidly progressive decrease in the block reward in Kaspa. The value of 2% is taken from an old vote of the community miner fee params. Please give your comments, amendments, and ideas. So let me just read you guys my response to this, and then we'll take it from there. I find this entire proposal troubling. This is the same BS the ETH devs shoved down miners' throats. Cut the miners' rewards without affecting their own pockets. If development funds are not being met, it's not the miners who should have to pay the bill. The entire community's obligation to support it. And if you don't think miners aren't already donating, you are sorely mistaken. Miners are the early adopters and the reason a proof of work coin ever gains any traction. Things like this should be addressed from the beginning with tokenomics. As soon as you start forcing payment to fund development, you are in turn funding your project with the security. I highly recommend any discussion on using forced funds to develop the project cease immediately. Don't ruin possibly the greatest chance at solving the trilemma we've ever had with someone's terrible suggestion, please. And then in addition to that, if funds are needed, I will gather the troops and sound the alarms. You simply need ask the miners will heed the call of duty. But the moment devs force a change in monetary policy, you create a divide in the classes. We will not repeat what ETH did. And then lastly, why is this even being brought up? Weren't we just bragging about how quickly we got funding for Ledger? And by the way, I don't think I mentioned that on this channel, but development for the Ledger wallet has already begun. I believe we have met the funding needed to do so. Anyways, to continue on here, this is a much needed discussion, and we've got lots of opinions on how to raise funds as a community for development tasks. We're going to have a lot of opposing views nevertheless. I don't want the solution. I don't know what the solution is. At least talking about it out in the open is helpful. As Tim said, having donations drives have served us well so far, and it's not impeding our progress, then let's just continue this way. Having a decentralized community project requires a delicate balance between all stakeholders, miners, developers, holders, pool operators, exchange, each with their biases. And this person chimed in and said, I think the 2% fee was more of a request. There's no mechanism for anyone to enforce that. And to which I replied, I think a request is reasonable. But again, I go back to the question, why is this even being brought up after bragging about how quickly we reached funding for Ledger? Also, how will this be viewed in the eyes of regulators? As long as it's voluntary, I have no issues with it and would even support it. But will miners really choose a pool with 2% less payout? And also to Tim, I apologize for calling it a terrible idea. My initial interpretation was that it would be mandatory. If that was not your intention, then I owe you an apology. However, if that is the case, I stand behind my statement. So we get a response from Tim at this point, and from here on out, it gets a lot more diplomatic, okay? Tim says, it was raised long before the successful collection of the recent fund. And the actual problem is that when we call for arms too frequently, the community starts complaining. We've met this situation already. So best of all would be to have two sources of funding, one slow and steady to some current needs in the form of mining fees, and one more powerful for a specific larger goals, but for much rarer usage. And I was still pretty combative at this point, and I replied, if people are complaining, you should listen, and perhaps you are asking too frequently. Slow and steady wins the race. If it is in fact decentralized, progress comes at the pace the community is willing to participate. The moment you use a mechanism to fund development, then this is a software company selling securities. To which Tim replies, then again, the problem is part of people want something that requires funding, and we've got a lot of voices yes for it in the vote. But then when it comes to collecting funds for it, people are complaining. So who should we listen to? And I replied, Tim, well, I think it's pretty obvious who you should listen to if you've paid attention to history of events like this from the past. If it's voluntary and no one participates, then that's it. People don't believe in it strongly enough to support it, period. End of story. And at that point, I'm being a little testy. I don't know who I'm talking to, so I just flat out asked, Tim, may I ask what your role in this community is? Are you a dev or just a guy who was elected mod? I mean that with no disrespect. I just want to get a sense of what type of authority you have in Kaspa. Me, I'm just a nobody YouTuber with very little intense knowledge of how everything operates. But I think people would like to know who is suggesting ideas like this. He says, you know, there are things like paying for site hosting and rewarding some small activities that should be rewarded by honesty. That still needs funding. People tend to agree that these things should be paid for, yet the same people tend to complain that funding collections are too frequent. And then those same people doesn't like to donate ahead for aims not clearly stated beforehand. Still, the mentioned tasks should be rewarded because they are done by the true enthusiast, so it's generally profitable in long term for the community to support enthusiasm in order to keep the existing and attract the new active participants. So we need to listen to all parties, and for this exact ability we need to broaden the sources of our income. And I asked him at that point, oh, and he did reply this, yes, I'm an elected mod, and I've also made a couple of small PRs to the Go version of the node source code. I also happen to be one of the 4 treasuries of the public dev fund, and a maintainer, soon to become X, of Kaspa Wiki, and a hoster of one of the shared instances of the web wallet. And I asked him at this point, are you willing to reword the proposal instead of from now on? And he said, sure, this is exactly why I wanted the discussion, to which I said, thank you. As many voices should be heard as possible before committing the decisions like that. And at that point, I became a lot more friendly. I said, please feel free to utilize my allegiance on any funding needed. I will spread the word if called upon and promise to check the funding channel regularly. And then, of course, he says, thank you, man. The more there are people like you here, the brighter the future for Kaspa. So one thing that I want to see happen is that the wording of this proposal gets changed and it doesn't insinuate that it is mandatory. Now, if pool operators and, you know, other people want to participate in pools that are going to have an extra 2% dev fee, then I'm totally fine with that. But the moment that it becomes mandatory, I'm not okay with that. I do think that, you know, we have to do our part to participate and donate so that development can continue. But again, this is not a race, okay? And I do encourage you guys to donate. And if you want to do so, please, there's a donation or a fund in here in the Discord. You can find it pretty easily. There's also funding pools. But again, go to this particular page, which is voting proposals, and go find the proposal, if I can find it. This might take me just a moment. But anyway, cast your vote. You know, I don't know if you agree with me or you disagree. It doesn't really matter. What really matters is that you voice your opinion. That's how true decentralization works. And I really want everybody to participate. Now, as miners, of course, we're going to be biased. We don't want to pay or be obligated to pay an extra 2%. I don't mind donating 1 bit. And in fact, I'm calling upon everybody that's watching this video to donate. But again, the moment that I'm forced to, then we have a problem. Anyways, that's it for the video, guys. Thank you for sticking through to the end. Hope you enjoy the content, and I will see you guys on the next one.